Welcome to Ask an Advisor. I'm Krista DiBiase here with Mr. Wes Moss.
Wes Moss, Krista DiBiase.
With a blazer on today.
It's cold. We're in the cold season, so it's like the chilly season, and it's kind of thick. It's almost like a coat.
Very nice.
I might have to take it off if I start sweating.
So last week, you and Clark did an episode together, and that was very well received. I thought that was so much fun. And you mentioned the AI. You guys talked about AI stocks.
Yeah, we talked about private equity and 401ks, but
Yeah.
we also talked about AI at least a little bit. And the risk that we see, Clark brings up a really good point. It's not just the market itself that is getting AI heavy, and that's what I want to talk about today.
Right.
The overweight. The market is a weight problem, weighted towards AI. And the question is, how do you, or should you, or if you wanted to, slim that down? And we touched on this last week, but there's new research I found over the past couple of days from JP Morgan that shows just how there's a handful, there's 41 of them, 41 AI-related stocks that they are reporting to out of the S&P 500. So you've got 459 stocks that are not AI related, and you've got 41 that are. That makes up the S&P 500, and it as far as the number of companies. But those 41 stocks really make up almost 50% of the market's weight.
So we're going to get to that first, but also later on there was a COLA raise for Social Security recipients.
Yes, and I want to talk about how there's the worry about Social Security. Does it really keep up with inflation? Is it going to go away? There's always a fear around Social Security, and I want to go through some history in relation to the new raise recipients just got.
Awesome. All right, so AI stocks.
All right, well, I kind of started that already, Krista. So
I know, sorry.
I kind of already.
How worried do we have to be, too?
I think it's just something that we can't overlook, and it's so new that 3 years ago, there really weren't any AI stocks because AI hadn't really officially launched. It was really November of 2022. And in this short, just shy of, call it 36 months, it's been the theme that has really driven the markets. And I think it's important to understand just how much it really is driving. And again, new numbers out of JP Morgan that really tell the story from a math perspective. They identified 41 AI-related stocks. That's 8% of the S&P 500, and it's 47% of the weighting. Almost half of the market are those 41 stocks. As an example, it's the usual suspects at the top: NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, et cetera. But then there are other companies that are a little less well-known, but they're also in the AI camp, if you will: Cadence Design, Dell, NXP, Digital Realty Trust, Supermicro, et cetera. And then there's some AI-related utilities that are very involved, and then some capital equipment companies, Eaton, Trane, et cetera. And I'm not saying run out and buy or short these stocks. What I'm saying is that it's a pretty short list, and it makes up about half of the S&P 500. It's also made up, that little group has made up almost 75% of the returns over the past 3 years.
Wow.
So if you're looking at those 41, that's 74% of the total increase. If you look at the rest of the market, the other 459 companies, it has been much, much less. So those 41, as of this past week, up about a little over 190% in total return. The other 459 stocks only up about 27%. Mm-hmm. And that's how you kind of put the two together and you get the S&P 500 return. But the 495 is up less than 1% since last November. So the drivers, even though it's been over the last 3 years, it's really even been more exacerbated over the past 1 year. Now, if you look at the top 41 stocks and they account for 50% of the weight, not the return, but the weight, that's actually not that new of a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It is almost normal that the biggest 40 or 50 stocks do make up about half the index. It's really the return that has been somewhat shocking. If you go and compare since November of 2022, 3 years, if you had money just in the safe 3-month treasury bill, you've made about 15% or just shy of a 5% annual return. The 459 non-AI related companies in the market up about 8.63% annualized. So better than treasuries, but not a whole lot more than sitting money essentially in cash. So it's an overweight problem. That's what Clark and I talked about last week. The question is, what do we do about it? One, we don't want to abandon stocks, right? We can't keep up with inflation if we're not invested for the really long haul when it comes to equities. So we can't just give up on equities, but we can rebalance and we can be mindful that one, we're not, if you own the general market, you're already about halfway invested in this one theme, AI. So be cognizant of that. And where would you could be rebalancing, and where would you be rebalancing? You'd be rebalancing away from this overconcentration. That would include things like equal weight market ETFs that don't have everything in just they're not weighted towards just the top 10 and top 41 companies. So that would be going beyond mega caps. It would be thinking about, do you have small companies in your overall in your 401k? Do you have middle-sized companies? Don't forget about international. I still have a real bias towards the United States and U.S. stocks because we do a lot of the revenue for companies in the S&P 500 in America are coming from outside because we have many global companies in the U.S. And then, of course, keeping your dry powder or safety assets. And those safety assets should be in things like treasuries or high-quality corporate bonds, and they should have very little to nothing to do with this single-themed market. Does the AI boom have legs? Yeah, it may very well continue for some time, but it has pretty skinny legs that's holding it up. And there's a lot of weight of that. So I would just be careful, and I really wanted to reiterate the theme that Clark and I talked about last week.
Okay. Well, and people are definitely calling for more of those joint episodes. We'll see if we can make it happen.
Just what Clark wants, more podcasts.
Yeah, really. Okay, we're going to go to questions. If you do have a questions, I saw somebody commented, like, how do I even ask a question on this podcast? You go to clark.com/ask, and you can indicate if your question is for Clark or for Wes. Lou in Virginia filled out that form, and he said, Wes, I have the opportunity to partake in an ESPP. What is the best way to determine if it's worthwhile? Any tips and or cautions would be appreciated.
A couple of things. You want to like your company. Mm-hmm. That's the number one. So the ESPP is the Employee Stock Purchase Plan, and it is an opportunity for you to typically get shares of your company at a discount. Mm-hmm. That is a huge advantage over time if you're always buying at, let's call it a 10 or 15% discount. I don't know exactly what yours would be, but it's going to be some discount. The other thing is that for a stock that's doing well, you're typically going to get a discount over that maybe have started at a window. Let's say the stock's at 40 and it runs up to 50. You may be getting a discount at 40. So 10% off of that or 15% off of that. So you may get even a bigger discount than the stated discount that your company's giving you. So one, you're investing in your own company, and you clearly should have at least some good understanding of, are things going in the right direction? Do you see this as an enterprise that'll be around for the next 20 years, 10, 20, 50 years? And if that's the case, I've seen people make a really nice chunk of retirement money when it comes to these ESPP plans. And most of them you'll see are going to be from publicly traded companies where you're getting a discount on the stock. And unless the company is going to fade away over the next 10 years, usually these are something to consider.
Doesn't it make sense even if you're going to sell the stock right away if you're getting like a 15% discount?
Well, you usually do have some holding period.
Yeah.
You usually have some holding period, and that's going to be part of the plan that you're in. So I would consider that. How long do you have to hold it before you can sell it? Then there are also ESPP plans for private companies. This would be you getting shares in the company has to be valued. You get a certain percentage or shares in that company, and you still get a discount. Those can be great. Those can be great investments too. I've seen people make $1 million or $2 million on their company, even private company stock. God forbid we're talking about private equity here. It would be your own form of private equity. So On those, what you have to really be careful about is what you just brought up, Krista, about selling stock in a public company. That's one thing. It gets really hard in a private company, and you usually have much longer hold times in order for you to actually realize maybe you do have gains. But usually if it's a private company, it may be a 2, 3, 5 year period where you're allowed to sell it. Mm-hmm. So it is about the holding period. It's about the discount you get. And of course, above all, it's about, do you believe in the company over time? The other risk here is overconcentration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to be careful about ending up with 3/4 of your portfolio is this one company stock. That's something to really be careful about.
I think Clark has always said he thinks no more than 10% in a company.
That's about right. I've seen people go higher than that, but that is a good rule of thumb.
Joyce in Virginia wrote in with this. I keep hearing about saving $1 million before retirement. As a single person, is the $1 million per couple or per person? I understand everyone's circumstances are different, but I like having that marker or goal. Thanks. You don't have to use my question on Wes's podcast, but I think it would clarify it for some, and I agree with that.
Joyce, I agree. I think it's really good for us to have a goalpost. Financial planning can be infinitely updated and changed, but it's really good to have a goalpost because it allows you to be able to give yourself a roadmap to get there. So I like having the goalpost, and I still, yes, and the $1 million number is what I would call the financial green zone. There's the red, yellow. Get to $1 million, and that is household investable assets. I think you're in a very good position to have a happy retirement. Now, it makes it tougher, Joyce, for you if you're single. But the world is, when it comes to running a household, there's usually one bill. It's one utility bill. It's one electric bill. It's one insurance bill. It's one mortgage. And it just is easier to get to these saving goals when you have two people dividing and conquering. My mom always used to say, when we were doing dishes, many hands make light work. Mm-hmm. And I still to this day, when I call my kids in, I say, guys, look, one of you can do the dishes, it's going to take you an hour. If we all do it together, it's going to take 10 minutes. So it's the same thing when it comes to saving with money. Many hands make lighter work. Now, yes, you may have to have 2 cards if you have 2 people, and there are certainly things that are there's 2 dinners as opposed to 1. But the number really should still be $1 million, even if it's just you, because to me that's a household number, what it costs to run a household and run a full retirement.
But again, it all depends on, so many factors, where you're living, what kind of, what you choose as a lifestyle.
Of course
right?
It does. And I'll talk to folks that have everything paid off and their spending is, they say, well, my spending's $2,500 a month. Mm-hmm. $2,500 a month in America.
Right.
Now that's rare, and I'd say that's on the low side. But if your spending is pretty low, then sure, you may not need a full $1 million, and your Social Security may cover it. But that's not where we want to be in retirement.
Okay. Angela in Georgia says, I'm over 50 and in a higher tax bracket. My 80-year-old mother is in a much lower tax bracket, but will likely leave me a decent-sized traditional 401k. It will be over $500,000 when she eventually passes. I've encouraged her to spend her money, but she doesn't seem likely to spend it all and wants to leave some for my family. Does it make sense to try to convert her money into a Roth IRA now to reduce the overall tax burden? And if so, should we convert a little bit each year or a bunch at once?
So Angela, I think if you look at this purely by the numbers and you say this is collective money, and if you're a family collective, then I think if you look just at the math, it probably does make sense. Your mom may be in the 10% bracket. She could convert and still stay, let's call it in the 15, and you may be in the 30 bracket. So over time, if your mom was to do the conversion, she's probably doing it at a much lower rate. And then it gets into a Roth, and then you ultimately inherit the Roth, and then it's tax-free for you. But I don't know if it's the family collective. And I don't know that your mom doesn't need the $500K for the rest of her life. She's 80. She could live. I met with somebody just this week. They're 92. I mean, and they're could live to 100. So your mom needs that liquidity for the rest of her life. And even though she's not actively spending it today on things she's choosing, she may need it in the future, and it may be for healthcare.
Yeah.
So the only way I would suggest this ever be done is that you are with your mom and a financial advisor that's looking at both of your situations. Can she afford to pay the taxes for you? That's really what this is. Mm-hmm. It's, can my parent, and that is the conversation I have with a lot of folks when it comes to the Roth conversion. Once in a while, a family will say, I really don't think I'm going to need this money, or I know I'm not going to need this money, and I would like to pay the taxes today for my kids. That's like 1 out of about 100. 99% of people say, I've paid a lot of taxes. My kids are doing okay. They're still going to get a lot of money. I don't want to pay the taxes today for my kids. Mm-hmm. Not everybody, but it's a pretty rare case. I've definitely heard it. I'd like to pay the taxes for my kids. If Angela, your mom says, honey, I'd love to pay those taxes for you, and it works with a financial advisor, fiduciary who's looking at both situations, mapping out that your mom could live for another 10, 15, 20 years, then maybe you collectively as a family decide that that's the smart thing mathematically, but it's got to be done together as a group.
Great. All right. Now, speaking of streams of income in retirement, Social Security.
We just got a raise.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about the history of Social Security, the raise that everybody's just getting that'll take effect at the beginning of next year when we come back.
And more of your questions.
Welcome back to Ask an Advisor. Wes Moss here along with Krista DeBiase to answer your questions here on The Clark Howard Show. Krista, we're talking Social Security.
Social Security, COLA raise.
Social Security, I would say, it gets a bad rap, but it has quietly been one of America's best inflation fighters. And it hasn't been forever, but if you go back over the history, and we just got a raise, or if you're receiving Social Security, you got a 2.8% COLA, cost of living adjustment. That starts in January of 2026. That may not sound like a lot on average for people. It's $56 a month. So it's not a lot.
It's something for sure.
But
it's a utility.
It is, I think the reason, and it didn't start, it was 1972, they passed the automatic COLA legislation. And then in 1975, that was the first time Social Security checks went up for inflation. And the reason I think it gets this rap that it doesn't keep up with inflation is that we've had some really different periods of time where Social went up a bunch, and then we had low inflation, and Social barely went up at all. In fact, there were a couple of years where there was zero COLA increase because during those years we effectively had zero inflation. But if you go back over time, and I went back to 1975, Social Security really does keep up with the cost of living. So I'll start with the forgotten years. It was 2013 through 2021, and the annual cost of living increases were kind of invisible. They averaged 1% or they were 1% or less. And that wasn't a failure of the system, and it wasn't that it wasn't keeping up. It was because inflation itself was really low. And so roughly 2009 and the 2010s, prices kind of barely budged in the overall economy. So we didn't get much of an increase. If somebody got a $7 increase per month, they just didn't even notice it. And then that, to me, I think that went on for a really long period of time. So people started saying, well, Social Security just doesn't go up for inflation. It was because we really didn't have a lot of inflation. Since, though, 1975, the COLA adjustments, that's when they started, there's been an increase in Social Security checks every single year except for 2009, 10, two years with low inflation, in 2015. Inflation then was effectively zero. But if you look over time since 1975, the average COLA increase has been 3.7%. So almost 4% per year. It's a very real number. Over the last 20 years, it's averaged 2.6%. So the COLA increase we just got is very much in line with that at 2.8%. Now, we did have some huge adjustments in the late 70s and 1980s. We hit 9.9% one year. That's a big jump. 11%, and then the largest was 14% in 1 year.
Wow.
A 14% raise. Then again, we went through the tame inflation period, 1 to 2%. But then more recently, in 2023, we saw some extremes again because inflation was extreme. We got an 8.7% raise for social in 2003. That was the highest in 40 years. And now it's kind of come back down to earth. It was a little over 3% in 24, 2.5% in 25, and now 2.8% for next year. It used to come in July, and then in the 80s, they amended that, and now we get our raises at the beginning of the year, which I think obviously makes some sense. And again, it was the pandemic inflation surge and that's why some of the more recent years were big jumps. The bigger question, I think, is that the fear of the trust fund running out.
Well, yes, I was going to say, I think since I was in my 20s, I've been told, don't count on Social Security, don't think it's going to be there, it's going to run out, it's a Ponzi scheme, things like that. And so how much should different age groups think about this as a part of their retirement planning,
Remember what that means. And it makes sense that it gets the rap that's going to go away because the truth is, at the current pace, and Social Security is very upfront about this, that trust fund, the cushion, is set to run out in the year 2032, approximately. They don't know exactly when, but you hear, well, wait, the trust fund's gone. It's at zero. That means social's at zero. And of course, that is not the case. That's just the cushion is gone. And without that cushion, remember, everybody working a wage income job, whether you're self-employed or you are W-2, you still pay into the Social Security system. And we have 160 million people in the labor force. And as long as they're working, they're going to be paying into Social Security on the first X amount of their pay. So that number in itself, that current money coming in, and really it becomes a true transfer system where money's coming in and then going out to Social Security checks. FICA's coming in, the FICA taxes are coming in, it's going right out to Social Security. And that would be able to still pay for 75 to 80% of the promised, in quotes, benefit that you see on that Social Security statement. So I think that's a worst case scenario. Social Security goes down by 20 or 25%. Now that's a big number. The reason I don't think that anybody over the age of 50 has to worry about that is because we've already seen Social Security make some tweaks. They raised the full retirement age by several years. They were able to do that. They've been able to raise the amount of income we pay Social Security taxes on. So there have been changes, and it's just a math formula, and it's not that complicated. And I think what'll happen if you really get to the point where the trust fund is let's call it a couple years, and Congress doesn't do anything unless it's emergency. I think if we get to within a couple of years of it going to zero, you're going to see some changes in the formula. Maybe they bump the full retirement age up another year, or maybe instead of starting at 62, it's 62 and a half or 63. And those tweaks, they may not sound like a lot, but they can move the math closer to working. But I don't think it's going to happen or impact anybody who today is 50 plus.
Makes sense because we're living longer too. So, okay, we'll go to questions. And this first one's from Maggie in Alabama. My husband and I are both 28, and we have what we believe is a good foundation of maxed Roth retirement accounts, as well as an HYSA with 6 months emergency fund and a general brokerage account. So I'm wondering what my best option would be for some safe growth for a fun account where we can put some excess money, which we can pull from for vacations. I want my money to grow, but I don't want this account to take too much volatility or be locked up for any period of time. Thank you.
Maggie, this is a time horizon question. And if you were thinking about, and I see a lot of families do this. They want a separate bucket for specific costs. And vacations are probably the number one bucket I see. But the reality is when you put money in a vacation account, you're going to probably spend it that year or the next year soon. So the time horizon is really short, Maggie. And you don't want to be investing that money in stocks when the time horizon is that short. So you're already using what is the right vehicle for that. And that's you said the HYSA, the high yield savings account. So for 1 to 2 year money, you've got to keep it in something short term. The last thing you want to have happen is you plan a family Disney cruise and it's X amount of dollars and the whole vacation account is in the market and we're in a 20% correction. Now you're 20% shy of the cost of your Disney family vacation. So I think it's the wrong practice to think that you can put money in a stock account and have it be whole a year from now. The other thing you mentioned, rarely have people will often want to do this and they say they want a fun account or they want a play account. And I would contend that none of this is play and there is no such thing as fun money because think about how hard it takes to get money, like how hard we have to work. And we have to work and we have to work hard. And then we've got to pay taxes and taxes are tough. And then at the end of the day, we got to pay for everything. And then we're saving. Now, hopefully you saved first or you took it off the top. But either way, you're having to pay for all those things, Maggie. And when it comes to fun accounts, I think that people like them when we're in a bull market and kind of everything's working. And people say, I like my fun account. But the minute we go into a bear market and when bear markets, most things don't work for a period of time. And your fun account becomes really unfun. So just remember that this is a serious sport. Investing is a serious sport. It's hard, it takes discipline, it takes time. And rarely have I ever seen a fun account really make a meaningful difference. What makes a real difference is discipline, broad diversification, low cost over a long period of time.
I agree, but I understand.
Did I just rain on Maggie's parade?
Well, I'm with Maggie psychologically. Clark always jokes with me because I have to put things in buckets. And so psychologically, if I've put money aside and I don't need to feel any guilt about what I spend that money on.
Oh, that makes it fun.
Yeah, because you save first, you do all those other things. But like this bucket of money, if I have this extra money, I can spend it on something frivolous or something I really enjoy, like an experience. That's what I would do too.
So it's guilt-free money.
That's what I think, yeah.
But she's talking about fun for investing. That's how I read it.
Okay.
People are like, I want a fun account to buy a bunch of stocks.
I think it's, no, because she said for vacation. Okay, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe she'll write back into us. But
Maggie, you're the best.
All right.
Enjoy your vacation.
Yes. Shaye in Kentucky says, I'm turning 45 in a month. I can retire as a public school educator in 2031 at age 50 with a pension. I just realized that I need funds to bridge between 50 and 59. Or 59 and a half. I'm looking to open a taxable brokerage account. Should I be aggressive or conservative in the taxable account with only having 5 years to build it? Should I be aggressive or conservative in my Roth IRA, knowing I have the pension in years?
So Shaye, first of all, it's so great to get to that 30-year mark. I've had so many teachers that I've worked with over the years, and year 18, it's like, I got 12 years left to get to the 30. And I just say, look, you've done it this long. You're over halfway there. Get to the 30 year and you're going to be so happy you did. And I can tell you, I've never had a teacher that gets to the 30-year mark say, gosh, I wish I'd stopped at 25 or 20. So the reward there is great. And I don't know the exact formula for Kentucky, but most of the teacher retirement programs around the country, and they're usually state by state, you're going to get 2.5% approximately of your highest, whatever the formula is, 2 years, 3 years average salary, and times the years, as long as you have a certain amount of years. So think about 2.5% times 30, you're at 75%. 75%, let's say they're basing it on $75,000. You've got $56,000 in income for the rest of your life. And that's pretty awesome. And so yes, stick it out, get to the 50 or get to the 30-year number. I would usually have your Roth be your more aggressive account because that's your longest term money. You absolutely are right. You do want a brokerage account because you want to bridge the gap before you get to 59 and a half. The rule of 55 probably doesn't apply if you're totally done working at 50. You could maybe lean on the rule of 72T, the substantially equal payments that you could access your retirement money prior to 59 and a half without the 10% penalty, but there's some ramifications to that too. You have to take it for a certain period of time, all the way to 59 and a half, 5 years, whichever is longer. But you're right. I would be aggressively saving in a brokerage account, and I would be moderately investing as opposed to 100% stocks. That's how I would do it. I would do a little more balance, a little bit more conservative in the brokerage for now than the Roth.
Okay, and Steven in Kentucky wrote in with this. For Wes, sorry, buddy, another 4% question. I suppose I'm a little thick.
I love that he called me buddy. Hey, bud. My kids make fun of me for saying bud.
Really?
And I guess I don't really notice it, but I say, hey, bud, what's up?
I say it to my son.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, buddy. I always said to my son when he was younger, for sure.
My kids will come in there and they're like, hey, buddy.
Okay.
So, hey, Steven. Hey, buddy. What's up?
Steven says, I suppose I'm a little thick, but I would like to know. I'm in a construction field that is very hard on the body, so I will probably not continue working until full retirement age. I'm 56 at present with $1.4 million in my 401k. Should I retire prior to 65, I'll be paying around $1,100 a month for insurance. If I elect to postpone drawing Social Security, will I functionally be able to withdraw enough to live on $70,000 from my nest egg until Social Security kicks in? I always thought $1 million was a lot until I've contemplated living on $40,000 a year.
Okay, so Steven, I'm just doing some math for you. First of all, there's never too many 4% questions because it's not just a 4% question. It's a how do I make my money last forever question. And that is never going to be a bad thing to talk about when it comes to what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. So it's totally cool, and I appreciate it. Let's run some numbers on that's what the rule is about. It's the rule of thumb is about. It's about maxing out what you can take out from your investments without running out. I'm doing some quick math. 70 divided by this 1.4, that's 5%. On the surface, that's a little above the 4% rule of thumb. So it's not that far off. But realistically, it's probably more like 6% for you because you've got to pay the taxes. So it's really, you're probably going to have to take 6% out gross to net down to the number you need. So 6%, depending how long, so think about that 4.25 withdrawal rate as your home base. It is not the end of the world to go above that home base. You just can't, you don't want to go way above the home base, and you don't want to go above the home base for a really long period of time. So if you're only 56 and you retired today, if you're sick, you've got another 9, 10, 11 years, depending on when you want to turn on Social Security. So doing 6% for a full 11 years is probably too much, and you may run into a problem where you feel like your money's really withering. What I think the answer here is that you're not too far off. And every year that you're able to work does matter because it gets you closer to when Social Security kicks in. And then that makes it much easier to reduce your withdrawal rate. You get back to home base. I think the easier answer, at least what I see in real life, Stephen, is there anything you can do, let's call it starting next year, where you're making... Well, you also have got to get to 59 and a half too to utilize this 401k money. Unless, again, you use the 72T rule, which we just talked about in the last question. So let's just take the age off the table and think about it as how do you bridge the gap until social kicks in? And the answer is part-time work. Imagine if you need 70 and you earn 20, now you only need 50. And if you're only earning 20, you're probably paying almost no taxes on that or very little. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, there's some taxes to pull money out of an IRA, but you're probably in a really good tax situation. So now all of a sudden you need 50 divided by 1.4, and now you only need 3.5%. Grossed up, maybe it's 4.5. So I think and I know that it's hard going from if you're actually on the job site, and it's in some professions, it's really hard to do part-time work, but it's not impossible. And the construction industry, I think, is understaffed for the most part.
Oh, yeah,
we're underbuilt in America, depending on the city you're in. And maybe it's not even construction. Maybe it's something completely different. But I think of that as you're in phase 1 of working saving. Maybe your phase 2 is way less work, just to have enough that you're not totally blowing the 4% plus rule out of the water. It makes it manageable. And I think that's the way to be thinking about this interim phase before social kicks in.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us this week on Ask an Advisor. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Please share this with a friend if you think they'd be interested, and subscribe whether you're listening on any of the podcast apps or on YouTube. And we'd love reviews as well on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day.